Welcome to episode 23 of Communicast, a communication skills podcast. I'm Scott D'Amico, president of Communispond, a global communication skills training organization. In this episode, I'm talking with Donna Loughlin, president and founder of LMG PR, a high-impact strategic public relations firm for innovative emerging markets. Check out the episode here, Donna's take on the power of networks, why agility is so important when it comes to communication, and how body language impacts your communication style. I hope you enjoy. Donna, great to catch up again. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your busy schedule to join me today.
Oh, so excited to chat with you again.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to our conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed the last time we had the chance to connect and chat a little bit. And I think with the work that you're doing, you'll bring a very unique perspective to communication skills. So maybe to help frame the conversation a little bit, provide some context to what we'll be talking about today, if you can, to get things started, maybe just tell everyone out there a little bit about yourself, your journey, and really what it is that you're working on today.
Yeah, well, thank you for that big question. I've been a communicator and involved in communications, pretty early on in my life. My father owned a publishing newspaper business, and so I was out and about with my uncles and my father doing as a reporter by age 8, which is kind of an unusual journey. That continued and piqued my curiosity to go off and study journalism in college, and then ultimately become an international news reporter in business and economics. I've been to more than 80 countries. I've covered everything from airplane incidents to elephants escaping from the zoo to viruses and things that actually impact pretty much anything with the economy, whether it be economic, I'm going to say anything economic or supply chain. A lot of things that we deal with today, it's cyclical, right? And so as a journalist, I learned my instincts were highly tuned. When we talk about communication skills, I'm going to talk about a little bit about communications refinement, because I think we all need to be a little more aligned in what's happening in the world. And then that led to my career as a public relations professional, storyteller, and then ultimately owning my own agency the last 20 years. And I also am the host of a podcast that really focuses on visionaries in the future they imagine.
Excellent. That is quite a journey, especially starting age 8 as a reporter. I just had the visuals of a little kid with like the notepad and pen going around trying to get the scoop on things.
And the Doogie Howser reporting.
There you go. The Doogie Howser of reporting. Love it. We're going to date ourselves a little bit there with that reference. But so if I think of that journey of starting off in the news industry, reporting, going into PR, all these types of things, running your own agency, so many aspects of that revolve around effective communication, especially to be successful at it, to have longevity with it, to make a career out of it. So from your experience, or really your viewpoint, what does it mean to be a great communicator? When you hear that phrase, what comes to mind?
Well, the first thing is being a great listener, because if we don't listen, we can't have two-way engagement and communicate. And I think that is true in verbal communications. I think it's true in digital communications. So those that are living in the virtual world, or now we're going to call it the metaverse, a text can be miscommunicated. Verbal communications and face-to-face communications are likely not to be as misinterpreted, right? And so I think we need to listen. And when I say listening, the audio part, but also listening to character text, and whether it's, an email, and really tuning in to before one responds. And if you watch any of the primetime news shows, and particularly the politicians are really good at this. They often will repeat the question before they answer the question. And the reason why they're doing that is because they're thinking about the best way to answer that question and buying just a little bit of time and ensuring it's being matched to probably a very schooled and trained, media prep for those types of interviews. But I think often in world situations, when you're in an office environment, or if you're in at a business conference, when people ask you very specific questions, sometimes we can sound very scripted. Or if you think about when somebody on a daily basis will say, well, how are you doing today? Oftentimes people will just respond by saying, oh, I'm doing great, even if they're not doing great.
Mhm.
And so I think tuning in is a really critical part.
There's so much important stuff, and I just want to hit on a couple of those things. There's this idea of listening. It comes up so much just in the day-to-day work that I do and all these conversations. It continues to come up. And when people say listening, they mean different things, whether you're actively listening or really listening rather than waiting to talk. And I read an article the other day that really hit on that there's, all different types of listeners. Are you listening to try and solve a problem? Are you really listening so you can show empathy? Whatever it may be, but not just hearing the words and trying to respond. And I will say, I could be guilty of that. I'm a problem solver. When I hear something, I want to just jump in and solution it. But so say if someone on your team is just like, oh, gosh, I really need a vacation. I'm like, yeah, sure, go ahead, take a few days, do what you need to do, right? Underneath that, there could be a whole lot of stuff going on, right? Work is driving them crazy. They're overworked, they're stressed out, they're on the verge of quitting, or maybe things are going crazy at home, whatever it is. By not really slowing down, trying to listen to what may be behind the words that they're saying is dangerous if you don't do that, because you can miss out on a lot of important things, whether it's internally with an employee or externally in a client-facing type of situation. So really, that listening is a skill that takes lots of practice to not just jump in and try and immediately respond or solution to it.
Yeah, well, and that definitely has been a theme and ongoing when people decide to leave a company, or in this last couple of years, the Great Resignation has been primarily driven by people realizing, like, I could be doing so much more. But as an employer, my joke is I can hire and fire myself anytime I want because I am my boss and I do have a team. But I also have to be in tune to myself.
Definitely, as a leader, being in tune to yourself, and then really also modeling the behaviors that you want to see in your organization, if they align to your mission, vision, culture, whatever it is. Just really make sure that you are out there in tune, modeling the behaviors. And the other thing that you touched on that I think is just crucial is the repeat rephrase when it comes to listening and communications. You mentioned it gives you time to think. Oftentimes we do see politicians do this, or you're seeing it if there's a Q&A session at the end of a presentation. Definitely gives you time to gather your thoughts, get the best message out there. The other benefit to that is oftentimes if it's a hostile or challenging question, it can allow you to neutralize it a little bit. So what we work with people on is not necessarily avoiding the question or trying to make a hostile question rosy and positive, but how do you neutralize it? Scott, what are you going to do to turn around this sinking ship? Could be a hostile question. And if I would repeat or rephrase that, I would say, well, what are we doing to make things better? Or what new strategies are we implementing? So we tried to neutralize it a little bit to take that edge off and get it back to the audience. So great points there.
Yeah, I'm a pilot for fun, not commercial by any means, but sport pilot, we'll just call it that. And one of the things I have to be continuously in tune with is my situational awareness. And I think that also applies to how we communicate and work as well. Situational awareness is something that whether you're flying an airplane, it's very important because you have air traffic control, and the weather can be your two best friends. They could also be your biggest challenges. So you have to really be in tune to what's happening around you. If you're riding a motorcycle, you need to be situationally aware. If you're driving a car or the car's driving you, you need to be situationally aware. And I think that it plays also in the workforce or the workplace as well. And I think there's a reason why human resources is now called people and culture, not human resources.
Definitely. With the situational awareness plays into part, I think a lot with not only just in-person communications, but if you tie it back even to something you touched on with the written communications, being aware of big picture, who are you communicating with? What's their style? How are you feeling at that particular point? Are you stressed? Are you frustrated? Are you excited? When you're not in tune to those things, you're more apt to either make a mistake, a silly mistake that can make you look bad, or send something perhaps that you might regret. a little bit later, I saw Apple just release a new feature where I think you can recall text messages that were sent or delete text messages that were sent. I think they're realizing people are just moving too quickly when it comes to written communications.
Well, we've
And
all
whether it's just
sent those messages, emails in the early days. You send an email and go, oh, can I retract it? Very hard to do, right?
never seems to work.
Yeah. And I think of the digital world that we are in and the younger generation that has 100% been, weaned on it. As humans, we often respond. We're not responsible, right? And so we respond very quickly. We react very quickly. And slowing down, I think, is a really key component of effective communications, is stopping, slowing, pausing, thinking, and as we said early, listening.
Thinking, what a novel idea. It'd be great if that would come back into favor. You just hit on something that's kind of a good segue into the next thing I want to chat about is in the workplace, you have digital natives, kids that have grown up with technology, cell phones, in essence, their entire lives. I guess at this point, I'm trying to think back. Yeah, like their entire lives, they've grown up with access to everything, constant communication. So if we think of the workplace today, what are you seeing are some of the most important communication skills that people need to have to be successful in the workplace?
Well, I think verbal communications is really important to be able to articulate thoughts, ideas, creativity, and also to be in adverse situations to, be able to debate and discuss tough subjects, with ease and not bringing other emotions and things into a conversation, and which I've seen very few. I will say in my business career, people for the most part are very professional. I think integrity and having ethics and tough conversations is really important. But I also think that oftentimes when I go into meetings, there's a mandate of turning your phones off, not being distracted, being genuinely, intentionally engaged with the people that are in the room. And I think that's really important. It's kind of like going back to basics in a lot of ways. It's like our business manners and our business acumen go together. And so if we take our manners and our ethics and our integrity out of our back pocket and we put them in the front pocket, wow, people respond and they communicate much more effectively. And I think that's been the biggest challenge in the digital era is in our end user expectations have become increasingly more spontaneous and much more just I don't know how to use the word entitled in the sense that we expect something. And I think that we need to be looking for is more is accepting sometimes and coming. If we're in a debate, it could be a sales meeting, right? Or it could be I'm talking on the phone with an editor and maybe they don't think that the metaverse or electric vehicles are really the way to go, or blockchain is needed, or any of these emerging markets that I might be working in. And so sometimes I get into deeper conversations about the pros and cons of things. And I think it's really important when you're, not everything is going to be a one and done conversation where you go into a hyper pitch and you're sharing your idea is not necessarily going to be accepted. And so I think that acceptance and that mutual understanding of you have a different perspective and a different grounding, bar than I do, right? People come from different regions of the country, or different regions of the world. You were just in Ireland. People culturally are going to look at things in a very different lens in Ireland than they are going to in the United States and regionally in parts of the United States. So I think it's really assessing the entire landscape.
No, that's an interesting point. And I think a big part of that really is this idea of, can you be present for the communications? I think for me, that's the first step in being able to have an open, constructive dialogue, especially around a tough subject. And not even necessarily have to be a tough subject. It could simply be a subject, as you mentioned, the metaverse, Web 3.0. There's proponents of it, there's skeptics of it. And I think to have a healthy dialogue about that, you need to be present in the conversation. Have that phone turned off. Whatever it is, really try and find time to tune in to that person. And I talk about this a lot, is when I prep for these things, I do these things. The phone is off, the email shut down, communicator's off, the door's locked. I send a text to the family. Hey, next 45 minutes, I'm not available. And we have gotten to that point, I believe, where there is the expectation of immediate results, immediate response, the Amazon effect, so to speak, where I'm going to get that instant gratification, get things now. And it has bled over into the workplace and into communication. And people are moving so fast, right? We talked about slowing down a little bit. That's causing people to move too fast, creating miscommunications. Errors are happening. Things are slipping through the cracks, or messages aren't being delivered as effectively as they could be. So if you have some sort of a challenging discussion or conversation coming up, make sure that you're in a position to be present and you're in the right state of mind for it.
Absolutely. And generations are different too, right?
Mhm.
So the boomers communicate very different than the millennials and the Zoomers. And we kind of forget about the X's. I'm like, okay, let's not forget about us X's. But there's been a lot of banter about these generations, right? And I work with all of them. And it's really interesting. I see more similarities with the Zoomers and the boomers in terms of work style and wanting to come to work and engaging in person, and a little restless in the hybrid workforce, whereas millennials have totally adapted to it.
Yeah, I think that awareness is so important when you're communicating, is not only what might this other person's viewpoint be, but is their style, what's going to impact their style, being aware of that, how they communicate, how they prefer to be communicated with, and then adapting. That's a big part of it, is not only being aware of my style, being aware of your style, and then hopefully we kind of meet somewhere in the middle so we can have that productive dialogue.
Yeah. Well, and you just came back from Ireland, and I've traveled a lot. And I think one of the things that's amazing about travel is it does put us a little bit out of our comfort zone, particularly if there's a language that we're not, keen to, like, and being able to there's three places I always go to when I travel. One is I like to go to the farmer's market, or equivalent to a farmer's market, public square, where people are with their families and dogs and hustle and bustle. And then I also like to, go find not a chain, or, but a mom and pop type of restaurant where the real people go. Right. And I think from those different environments, you kind of get a glimpse. You might not get the whole picture, but you get a glimpse of, how people live and how they dress and they operate and their social decorums and things. And I think that it goes a little bit into my reporting days, where I kind of check out everything. I kind of assess things the same way I do when I fly. I got to go through pre-check, a run up, and then a flight. And then I have to do, when I land, I have to go back through and do a post check of everything. Right. And document. And I think that's one of the disciplines for me, particularly, has helped me to refine and the communications process and the situational awareness that I've talked about, I think is a keen part of that. It's actually helped me better refine my communication skills. Verbal communications is one thing. Written communications is another course that I think is equally as important, that people often don't slow down. I'm reading 4 books right now simultaneously for my podcast, and that's a little bit crazy. It reminds me of being back in college. And one of the things I realized is I could read 3 effectively. 2 is probably better. 1 would be perfect, right? And so that's just an analogy I keep playing in my head, is that sometimes we have so many things coming at us that we can't really process the content and the information and be able to celebrate the parts that are the most important.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some diminishing returns there, whether it is reading books, trying to juggle your email, text messages, Slack messages, whatever it is coming in all at once. So figuring out where's that at for you. And I think there's really a lot of parallels to what you talk about with your experience being a pilot and flying, to on the front end, making sure that you're prepared. And if I think of the parallels between that and say communication or preparing for a meeting or a sales meeting, are you doing the prep work on the front end, understanding your audience, whether it is the machine that you're flying on, all that stuff, doing your safety checks. You've prepped, you're in air. Can you be flexible? Something happens, the weather changes, equipment adjusts. I don't know that much about flying, but I'm assuming there has to be a level of flexibility when you're up there and relying not only on instruments, but also guidance that you may get from the towers. And then afterwards, like debriefing, checking everything, and then moving forward.
Yeah. Agility is one of my favorite words. I always tell people, when it comes to careers and people talk about, work-life balance, and I'm like, what? For me, it's all about agility and flexibility and being able to adjust and reprioritizing things. And I think in conversations, I noticed that my meetings have gotten to go from what used to be in-person meetings a few hours. Now they're maybe an hour, 45 minutes to an hour max in Zoom, right? I personally prefer to meet in the same conference room. I mean, we're having a great conversation in the digital world, but I see you. So that's better than just the audio, right? And I find that one of my favorite tools, and I was kind of crushed recently when I saw the last phone booth was torn out of a New York City station. I think it was Grand Central Station. And I felt a little crushed, that, oh my goodness, the end of the era. Well, the era has actually been over for quite a while. But I'm still very nostalgic when it comes to vinyl records too. And I have quite a collection, but I had to go back out and recollect those because I got rid of a lot of them when CDs came along. And I feel that is in some ways for us to go back to basics, pick up the phone, have an old fashioned conversation. And you might actually get somebody on the other end of the line. Like the old tin cans we used to play with as a kid. You get the 2 juice cans or 2 cans with the string. And, there's a reason why that was, a discovery. It's kind of fun.
All these tools that we have are great, but if they're not helping us solve the problem, it is always good to go back to the basics. And I encourage my team a lot that, but if I see lots of emails going back and forth, and the situation isn't progressing, I'll use it like, hey, let's pick up the phone. Just call somebody, call one of the other people that's dealing with this, try and sort out, usually within minutes, the problem is solved just by picking up the phone, because in text, especially, you miss out on so much intent, tone, inflection, whatever it may be, you're going to miss out. So on the phone, you can pick up on more of that. Video, you pick up even more. And then in person, ultimately, you're getting all of it. So it really does help to be more effective there. And you mentioned agility being your favorite word. So if you think through, Donna, your career, what would you say, it may be agility, what would you say is one skill that has really helped you to be successful and get you to where you are today?
You know what? I'm a network. I would tell you that it really comes down to the power of a network and keeping the integrity of that network together. I connect with so many people on LinkedIn, and I think it's so important to, one of the skills that my father taught me really early on, besides having really great paper for my business card, is have the first impression, right? People put their business card in your hand, and if it's nice paper, that meant, well, this is probably somebody, I should trust. But I think that integrity is so important, of knowing exactly who you are, what you stand for, and how you operate and do business and you communicate. And one of the reasons I like, connecting with people in LinkedIn and building new relationships is that I think in all the social platforms that we have, they're like, hey, look at me and my coffee drink and me in the sunset and having, a good time with my friends and puppies and things is all great outside of work. But when we're in a professional career and we want to build a positive perception and we want to build positive communications and network, and is building the power of the network is so important. I wish I actually had my 20 plus prior to LinkedIn years on my, connections on my connected to my profile. I don't, because I had a big Rolodex. and one of my first bosses when I was a journalist gave me his Rolodex as a gift when he retired. Here, this is for you, kid. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do with this? I still have it in storage in a box because I couldn't part with it. I had business cards from some very prestigious people that, in politics and in business and United Nations and just all over the world, and from my journalist days. And I value that. I value the power of a contact, the power of a handshake, which is that we don't really do anymore, right? But it could be a digital handshake. These conversations, the conversation you and I are having, is very valuable to me because we're communicating and we're sharing wisdom. And I think that's one of the importance of business that I hope doesn't go away is that the business acumen and understanding exactly, when it comes to business skills, the listening, the two-way communication, not one-way, two-way communications, the integrity and the authenticity of the conversation, and really being able to know the difference between this and all the distractions that are out there.
So when I edit this, I'm gonna have to find a picture of a Rolodex and splash it up there for some folks that may not know what it is. So it's like a little box you used to keep on your desk. You put either note cards in it with people's contact information or their business cards, and you can scroll it and sort it by letter alphabetically. It was a great tool before the phone and all the features there. And I will say that's one of my frustration points with my phone is it seems as if the actual phone feature is the least functional. The phone, the voicemail, the contacts. Out of all the apps out there, I have the most problems with that one. They, I think, put the least amount of effort into it.
And they disappear sometimes. And
yes.
Like, where did this contact go? That was in here before. Well, just to give you another visual is my Rolodex. It was like grandfathered to me down from a highly respected reporter at the Washington Post. It looks like a carousel. It's like this big, like, almost like you flip it around and it's like a carousel. There's thousands of cards. Crazy.
Love it. But you bring up a great point with the power of a network. For those folks that are out there really starting their career, it's important to build, for me, relationships, not just contacts, not cards to throw on there, people to add connections, but really, are you building relationship? Are you adding value to that other person and vice versa? And for me, a big part of it is just staying in touch. There's people where just periodically I try to carve time out of my calendar to call up folks that I worked with 10 years ago, just say hi. Hey, what's going on? How things going? What's going on in your world? Can I help? Whatever. Continue to build that because you never know what it's going to lead to. Because at some point, you may need them. They may need you. You can help get them a job. You could help land them a deal, vice versa. Really not just being content with having people out there, but how do you engage with that network to build true relationships? For me, it's a big differentiator.
Yeah. And keeping it relevant, right? So you never know where a network contact can actually become valuable. When oftentimes, people reach out to me in early career, as well as, later down in their career, looking for a new career opportunity, looking for an expert for a conference, looking for, just a referral or hiring new talent. Right. And oftentimes I find that, I like to be helpful. I like to help people, daisy chain and network, and mentoring is so important. And I think one of the things that I love about having interns is that mentoring interns to get them excited, and particularly in my field, which is in public relations, they're textbook savvy oftentimes when they come to work with me, but they don't have the business acumen or the communications acumen in place. So would ask tough questions in a phone conversation or even email. Those are things that are just like learning grammar. Like, to me, effective communications and the communication skills is something that we should always practice. It's not just learn once, one size, rinse and repeat, right? It's like, it's an everyday avocation.
They're skills that if you don't practice, they are going to fade away. Just like if you exercise, you develop those muscles and you take weeks, months, years off, those muscles are going away. Same thing with communication skills, whether it's your writing skills, your public speaking skills, or just general dialogue. It's going to fade away if you don't practice it. So it is important to continue to find opportunities to refresh those skills, whether it's just by yourself doing a recording, watching it back, trying to find ways to improve, going through trainings, taking opportunities to learn from others, or just work interactions. Always really be conscious of those skills because they make a huge difference in your career.
Yeah, absolutely.
Donna, who has been somebody that's influenced your communication style, and what was it that maybe you took from them, adapted, and really made it your own?
I've had a lot of great mentors, but I'm a very public facing person who I think just has a great interview style is David Letterman. And one of the reasons I like about him is that he looks very unassuming.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would you tell him your story? Because right now he just looks like somebody's grandpa, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he has his new show, and which I love because he's very relaxed. His body language is very relaxed. And so that's a communication style, right? So when a person is very relaxed and open, people typically are going to be a little more relaxed and open. So he's somebody I've studied quite a bit from the way back in the days when he was in primetime TV to his current. And I think that his current work is probably his best work because he's having fun with it, right? He's doing, he's not on the table for having to, to make certain, revenue ratings and things like that. He's really purely doing what he wants. And I find when it comes to interviewing, I worked, as I said, with some amazing reporters and journalists, the Washington Post, Reuters, and BBC. I learned from all of them. And so there was a whole school of traditional reporting professionals that I've worked with. And from them, collectively, the thing that I learned the most, and we talked about listening, but is really having empathy in the conversation as well. And I don't mean empathy in the sense of like it's an emotional conversation, but just knowing the place in which that person is coming from. So as a news reporter, I covered everything from crisis situations, there were, whether it be a plane crash or a bombing or someone's, literally, somebody's a crash in Wall Street. Those are pretty intense subjects to cover. And so when you go in to have a conversation with somebody about, how they were feeling, you can't really ask that question. You have to come from a place of empathy and openness. And that's why I say that I think David Letterman does that really well. And if I go all the way back to one of my first teachers, second grade teacher, influenced me immensely. I had a lisp. I also had a little bit of a brogue. I took speech therapy for 5 years.
Wow.
I had a Scottish grandmother, kind of messed me up with my accent, and I wasn't understood. And so I had things that I wanted to say and I wanted to share, but I didn't have the confidence. So I ended up taking speech therapy. And the crazy story is I ended up in communications, my entire later in childhood. And that was probably that pivot when I was about 8, when that happened, when I had the confidence that I used it as practice, going out with my father and my uncles to do stories. I could practice speaking. And if I practiced speaking, then I would overcome. So I have no fear, obviously, because I wouldn't have got an undergraduate and then a master's degree and spent the last 20 plus years in this field. But I think sometimes getting over that hurdle is something, we look for in mentors in our career.
Yeah, practice is definitely a big part of it. Having strong mentors, another big component, and absolutely love the answer of David Letterman. I'm a huge Letterman fan. I grew up watching him and really enjoy his show. It's Netflix, right? My next guest needs no introduction. And the thing that always strikes me when I watch that is I go into it as a fan of Letterman, but I always come out a big fan of the guests that they have on the show that I may not have either know much about or maybe had preconceived notions about them kind of going into it because of their public persona. But because of his relatability, his relaxed style, the preparation that has obviously gone in on the front end so that he kind of knows where to go, but still flexible enough to let it maybe shoot off in a number of different directions really is what makes that show so great. And yeah, it makes his communication style so powerful.
Yeah. And sometimes I would go, well, I don't know if I'm going to watch. This is not a guest, but maybe I would particularly watch. But there's been a couple of episodes where I went in thinking like, oh, I don't think I'm going to like this. And I ended up like exactly what you said, going, wow, this person's actually really cool. And I didn't think they were so interesting.
Absolutely.
That's a gift.
Definitely. Donna, as we wrap up here, what piece of advice would you have for somebody, whether fresh out of school, mid-career, maybe looking to go into the communications or the PR space? What advice, tip would you have for them around, the importance of communication skills and the impact that they can have?
Call me. No, I think it's really important to surround yourself by a variety of, people early on in your career, the people that can be mentors, people, that mentors in the sense of professionals, college professors, alumni at universities, reaching out very early on and to people who have jobs and careers that you might want to consider. You don't have to wait to get a degree to have those conversations. And one of the things that my father exposed me to at a very young age is he would take me to, I grew up in the Silicon Valley, which was then known as the land of Heart's Delight. And he would take me to Berkeley and Stanford and Lawrence Livermore Lab and other research centers in Hewlett Packard Garage and places that, that by the time I was had a concentration in the tech sector, I was pretty well schooled in all the research centers and everything because my father was interested in those things. So my father was a great teacher and exposed me to a lot. And I think if we're keep our mind open and explore, where resources can lie within the power, going back to the power of the network, is university professors, alumni, your class peers. Go to entrepreneurial accelerator meetups and pop-ups that are happening now, looking for career fairs where you can explore. And through that whole process, using it as a means to build and practice your communication, because it's going to be so important for you to either take that first step and get an internship or the first job in your early stages of your career.
That is fantastic advice. This idea, get exposure, right? Whatever it is that you're passionate about or you think you may want to go into, find opportunities to gain exposure to that, whether it is through, as you mentioned, your school, people in your community, your network, different groups, online, whatever it is, find opportunities to get exposed to that. One, to see, really, is this what I think it is? Do I want to go down this road? And then, love it, you mentioned, find this as an opportunity to continue to practice your skills. So,
well, I love you have a sign in the back of your wallet that says work hard and be nice to people. I actually want to change that to work hard and be nicer to people, because I think that is so important, that there's just certain, as they put the manners out of the back pocket and be genuine. Be genuine who you are, but be genuine, authentically nice to people. And we've seen this in the past couple of years. And I think one of the best things that's happened in the last few years is that people are kind of checking back in with each other.
I agree. Absolutely. Always good to find the silver linings. So, Donna, thank you so much. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for joining me, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Scott.
Take care. A special thanks again to my guest, Donna Loughlin. She really nailed it with her point around the importance of situational awareness and relating it back to her pilot experience. Being aware of yourself and your surroundings really is a key to effective communication. As always, if you haven't done so, please be sure to subscribe to Communicast so that you can be notified of new episodes. Thanks, and have a great day.